We do want to explain that we group together the three stories, not because we think that working in Israel is similar to rescuing Jews out of the claws of a hostile enemy like in Ethiopia or in Sarajevo. This is very different, yet it does have certain components of this kind of heroic response to war. And therefore, we put them together. So Gideon, who you heard before, will talk a little bit about what we did during Operation Lead Cast. It was Cast Lead, whatever, Dreidel, something. And he will explain what was that and why. You'll understand why we grouped them together.
Okay, thank you, Amir. The question we have to ask ourselves is what happens when a country that has a Jewish government is under war, and what is the responsibility of that government to take responsibility for its people? And the other component that we have to remember is that, as far as I'm concerned, as someone that has been spending significant amounts of time down south in the area that's colored by the purple all the way to the red, is an area that continues to be under fire. So this is not history that I've come to talk with you about today. It's actually, and unfortunately, present. In 2009, in January, we saw a significant increase of Qassam rockets and later Grad missiles that were being fired over from Gaza. You see there the Mediterranean on the left, Tel Aviv not far away as you head down south Gaza. So really in overnight you had the expansion of a missile range by 36 miles, which meant that the government had to work with all of the citizens and residents of that area to make sure that they were prepared. I'm not going to go into the Second Lebanon War purposely, but I want you to know that lessons were learned in terms of how cities and mayors, welfare department heads, and others work together. JDC has spent the past 7 years on the Gaza border working with municipal officials and others to make sure that people are fully prepared for these times of war, to the point where if you had a round table of the 10 most critical people in a city, JDC was there to organize and make sure that you knew exactly what you needed to do and your name would be on that part. You knew that you were responsible for the buses, you knew that you were responsible for medical care, and we actually had a full plan in place so that when the missiles started coming over, you actually had a very functional region called the Southern Region of Israel. Well, what did the JDC have to do? In this case, we waited for the government's sign. Day 4 of the war, the government rings up JDC and says, listen, there's nobody better than you in terms of reaching out to the elderly and disabled of our country. You remember from my last presentation. We estimate that there are approximately 25,000 elderly and disabled that are in that firing range that have nobody that is reaching out to them. These missiles are falling. They're by themselves before they fall. As they hear it whooshing through the air, after it lands, they continue to be alone. You have developed a project called the Supportive Community for the Elderly. Simply put, it assigns a caseworker, a social worker, that is responsible for X number of elderly households, provides a basket of services everywhere from a panic button on their hand to free doctor visits and ambulances if necessary, and most importantly, a cell phone number that says, this is my local advocate in my neighborhood. Can you please replicate the program for another 25,000 people, and can you do it now? Okay, so JDC, we know that a program that works well in times of peace works even better in times of crisis. That is a fact, and that is something that we did. Within 3 days, we had hired 180 social workers that were reaching out to groups of 120 elderly and disabled. The program was called 120 Strong. For Hebrew speakers, Ad 120, right? That blessing that may you live until 120 years old. And we launched it. I want to talk about the kids. Just take you into an area of Sderot that was hit by a Qassam. You can see the shrapnel. We get closer, it gets worse and worse. Qassam hit at 12:11, and that clock remains in this home. The question is, who is in the home? This is Yossi, who he's 9 years old. He's in the 2nd grade in a school in Sderot. And when that Qassam hit his home, At 12:10, he actually was unable to make it to the bomb shelter and actually took shelter in his bathtub. Question is, what happens after the war is quote-unquote over, because it does continue in the sense that Qassams continue to reign over, and how does Yossi go back to school after being at home in this reality which is completely abnormal? By the way, 9 years old, think about it. This is an 8-year-old conflict. Yossi was essentially born into this abnormal way of living. JDC reached out to the Ministry of Education, and it was decided that in every school in the southern region there would be one room that is designated for therapies. Critical. One place where every child and teacher who was also traumatized can go to get different therapies. I'm talking about pet therapy, which you're looking at now, movement therapy, dance therapy, and art therapy. Check this next slide out. This was drawn by Yossi. Hebrew speakers can see pachad. Pachad means fear. If you see what's happening here, you have a Qassam falling on someone. Interesting, the house on the right-hand side, no door. No door, no foundation, no way of getting in, no way of getting out. A frightening picture which is very telling, especially to the psychologists that are working on behalf of JDC, on your behalf, in the school system. Look at that, ka'as, anger. This is the situation in the schools in the southern region, and it continues to be as such. The only thing I'll tell you is that JDC is able to provide a little bit of relief, believe it or not, through this little doll right here. Chibuki, the Huggy doll, which was actually piloted in the Second Lebanon War, when you had 6,000 refugees on a beach of the Mediterranean that had no home because they had to leave the area. And this simple doll, when put around the neck, works wonders. Taking pictures now. Works wonders only because you have a child without the doll and you say, how are you coping? How is it going? The child says, fine, yeah, great. What do you expect a 5-year-old, 10-year-old to say? Yeah, it's good. What do you expect? I'm suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. No, I'm not. I'm sorry, I have my back. Yes. You put the Chibuki doll on. How does that feel? It feels good. Tell me, how is Chibuki feeling today? Not good at all. What happened to Chibuki? Don't tell anybody, but he wet his bed last night. Wow. How does that feel? It feels horrible. I'm okay. He's the one that needs the help. And suddenly you have a lifeline to the child's heart and mind. Extremely sad, but very real. So this is now in every kindergarten, elementary school across the southern region. Chibuki, ask any kid down south about Chibuki. The final thing I want to tell you about, which I'm excited to share, I just smuggled it in from Israel, is this thing right here. This is a map of the state of Israel, and this is Sderot. What we found is that all the small businesses, domestic tourism down south was essentially shut down. Both Israelis were going there were no delegations, only a few that were headed down south, so you had some entrepreneurs that were going under. JDC reached out to them and helped build virtual shops by the internet. Today there are over 150 websites that JDC has built to help keep these people in business. So I'm checking out the list of websites and I see this guy's name, Yaron Bob, of all Hebrew names, Bob. So I said, this guy's interesting. He says that he turns swords into plowshares. And I thought, okay, this is already something that I'm interested in. I head down to the small moshav, a very small farming settlement where it is desolate. There are tumbleweeds there. And I go into a blacksmith shop, workshop, and I meet Yaron Bob. And Yaron Bob has a pile of Qassam rockets that go up to this. It's massive, massive. And I say, Yaron, tell me what you do. And he says, well, I turn swords into plowshares. I turn Qassam rockets into roses. So I'm actually holding a Qassam in my hand right now that was sent over by our friends on the Gaza side. His business is actually selling these Qassam roses. And I thought it would be fascinating to bring this to America and share it with you. This is, I think, the best of what JDC does. Taking a really traumatic, harsh situation and turning it into something with peacefulness, hope, and light. And so I brought this for all y'all to see and share. So that's for you.
Thank you, Gideon.
Thank you.
So.